This lesson teaches you how to check the accuracy and validity of HTML syntax using Weblint. You will also be introduced to HTML link validators, issues regarding evaluation of your website using different web browsers, usability issues, and how to perform surveys and analyze the log of visitors to your website and web pages. Testing and validating HTML code is important for a variety of reasons. It is easy to make mistakes when developing HTML. The use of authoring tools that generate tags and their associated attributes can help minimize this, yet it is still critical to check the HTML source code for accuracy. Hyperlinks also need to be checked, as URLs may change frequently. You want to be certain that the links are valid and do not yield server errors. Since HTML is a cross-platform language and the same web pages can be viewed on Macintosh, Windows, and Unix platforms, it is important to evaluate the same HTML pages on the various platforms. Perhaps even more important is viewing the same HTML source code with multiple browsers. For example, how does a page look in CSA Mosaic versus Netscape Navigator or Microsoft Internet Explorer? As there are various levels of the HTML standard, HTML 1.0, HTML 2.0, HTML 3.2, HTML 4.0, and proprietary extensions, it is important to identify the target audience and the type of web browser for which you are developing. You can then ensure that the HTML code complies with the standard for your audience. Finally, once the HTML source has been validated for accuracy, cross-platform and cross-browser integrity, and compliance with the HTML standards, the usability should also be evaluated. The usability includes issues such as the readability of the text, navigation between pages, and the structure and organization of site. There are tools available to automate many of these tasks. It is also a good idea to have other users test drive your site at various stages of development, and certainly before you finalize the design. Users from all experience levels can give you valuable insight. There are a variety of tools available to automatically check your HTML source code for accuracy. Some validators check to make sure that you are using proper syntax and proper HTML construction. Other validators check the compliance of your HTML source with various levels of the HTML standard. Some browsers are more forgiving than others. Netscape, for example, is one of the most forgiving browsers and is very good at detecting mistakes and correcting them for the author. Other browsers are not as forgiving. That is why a good HTML code validator may be an essential tool. In this next exercise, you will learn how to use an HTML validator called Weblint. Weblint can be used to evaluate the integrity and accuracy of your HTML source code. This tool allows you to evaluate an entire web page by specifying a URL, or alternatively, you can manually enter HTML source code for validation. The latter method is used in the next exercise. The Weblint output presents two blocks of text, the Weblint warning messages and the HTML source listing, if the Show Source checkbox was selected before submitting the form. The Weblint warning messages specifies the line items where problems were found. The HTML source listing show lines of HTML source code that match the warning messages. Weblint does a fairly good job of explaining each error message. Note that some mistake can generate more than one warning message. For example, the incomplete title tag generated two messages. The first message indicates that /title is an unknown element. This is obviously a simple syntax error attributable to the misspelling of the title tag. The second message indicates that the opening title tag does not have a closing element. This is also attributable to the misspelling of the closing title tag. Once the integrity of the HTML source code has been evaluated for accuracy, the validity of all hyperlinks should be checked as well. If improper syntax was used when creating an anchor, this will be discovered by an HTML validator. However, this does not guarantee that the links themselves are correct. Since the web is in a constant state of evolution, sites are moving and changing their URLs constantly, and your HTML links need to be constantly updated to avoid incorrect URLs. There is nothing more frustrating than clicking on a link only to find that a server error is returned. There are several ways to check your links for validity. The simplest way is just to manually test all of your links by clicking on them. This is tedious but doesn't require any special software or utilities. Automatic URL checkers exist for many platforms. These are sometimes referred to as spiders or robos. Fortunately, there are a number of sites dedicated to checking links and performing other measurements of a website's performance. These other checks may include checking the time it takes to load pages, spell checking, and listing of other sites linked to your site. Since HTML is a cross-platform language and the same web pages can be viewed on Macintosh, Windows, and Unix platforms, it's important to evaluate the same HTML pages on multiple platforms. If you are developing your website using a Windows platform, you should also try to look at the same pages on a Macintosh and a Unix-based system. Even more important, you need to evaluate your website using multiple browsers. Browsers that support standards, since HTML 3.2 support the use of tables, whereas other browsers do not support the table tag. If your target user is forced to use a browser that does not support tables, it would be wise to avoid using tables or to develop alternate pages that do not rely on tables. Use the pre-formatted tag to generate a table, or use a list or some other method of presenting tabular data. Lastly, the HTML author also needs to be aware of the many versions of web browsers that are available. There are still users of version 1.0 of the Netscape browser or Mosaic, which do not support HTML tables. After the integrity of the HTML source code and the links have been validated, and the HTML document has been viewed on multiple platforms with multiple browsers, the usability of the website should be evaluated. A usability evaluation is more subjective than the evaluations already discussed, but it is equally, if not more, important. No matter how perfect your HTML source code is, if your site is not easy to understand or navigate, users will become frustrated. Usability should be kept in mind throughout the entire design process. During the planning and design stages, when you create a storyboard for your site, you should structure your site to meet certain usability criteria. Some examples of design objectives include: does the home page provide a clear description of the site and the main menu? Do I want to accommodate users with graphical and text-based browsers, or users that don't automatically download images into their browser? Do I want to accommodate low and high bandwidth users? Is the interface intuitive and easy to explore? Is the interface easy to remember for repeat visits? Is it easy to find topics or pages embedded inside the site? Is the layout, design, and structure consistent throughout the site? These issues and many more are related to the usability of a site. The more experience you gain in creating sites, the better you will get at designing and building sites. However, even experts should enlist the support of users to test their sites, preferably ranging from inexperienced to very experienced users. As mentioned before, it is important to identify the target audience. so that design decisions can be made with the audience in mind. Once your site is up and announced to the world, you should continue to evaluate its utility and usability. There are several ways of going about this. Perhaps the easiest way is to invite comments from visitors to your website. This can be done using an online guest book or asking visitors to fill out a survey form. Also, give them an area to enter their own comments. Here is an example of a simple form that asks users to evaluate a site. A second approach is more quantitative in nature and requires that you have access to the log files that are kept by the web server and system that is hosting your site. This information will allow you to track the number of accessed pages or hits on your site and may even provide information about length of the visit, domain name of the visitors, or other valuable data. A careful analysis of the log data may give you valuable insights into the usability of your site and the pages that are more interesting to users. Many of the interesting discoveries that you can find from your log include: which pages are being visited most often? Are users finding what you intended? How long on average do people spend on each of these pages? You may only be able to estimate this, but it may indicate which pages users find most valuable. How are users getting to what they want? Are they always going to pages 3 or 4 levels down? Perhaps some content should be moved up the hierarchy to make it more accessible. The internet domain of users can indicate whether they are from an educational institution, the government, commercial interests, or non-profit organizations. You can also identify foreign users. If you have programs and utilities on your pages for people to download, what are the most popular ones? What pages are getting very few hits? Is it because of poor content? Perhaps users can't find those pages easily. Move the pages or add an index and search tool to your site to assist users. Are there repeat visitors that return to your site on different dates? Do you only get visits from a user one time and then they never return? Analyzing logs and requesting feedback from visitors are powerful ways of evaluating the success of your site. If your site generates a large number of visitors and most of the feedback is positive, you will know that you have a winning site. If you are not getting much traffic or the comments you are receiving are less than positive, it may be time to revise your site and make improvements. The following is an example of an entry from an access log which follows the NCSA and CERN formats.